Hi everyone. Hi everyone. Thanks for joining us for this Future Earth pop-up webinar on writing scientific commentaries. I hope you can all hear and see me fine. Just to let you know, this is being recorded and will be available on YouTube and on our website afterwards. And the slides that Ninad is going to show will also be available on our website and on SlideShare. I'll hand you over to Ninad now to start the webinar. Please feel free to put comments and questions in the chat box as we're going. Thanks.
Thanks, Lizzie, and thank you all for joining. I hope you can hear me okay too, but if there are any issues, there's a chat box and you can just write in there. My name is Ninad Bondre. I work as a science editor and advisor for the International Geosphere Biosphere Program based at the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences. And in my former career, I have worked as an associate editor for the journal Nature Geoscience, part of the Nature Publishing Group. So I have a bit of experience over the past several years in terms of scientific communication, both as far as academic papers go and opinion pieces go. And I'm joined today by Owen Gaffney, my former colleague, who's now with the Stockholm Resilience Center, who also has an extensive record and experience with academic publishing as well as commentaries. And Owen will make some interventions off and on, but I will start this off. I will now go to my first slide and share my screen here.
Thanks, Ninad. I've just put a question to our attendees because yes. I don't know if they're a very quiet bunch this morning, but I'm interested to know if they can actually hear and see us. We can see them, but I'm not sure if they can see us. So if anyone is accessing this, please could you respond in the chat box, please?
I'll just wait for a few seconds then to confirm that.
Yes, fantastic. People are responding.
Excellent.
Okay, over to you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Lizzie. Good to know that you can see and hear. So here's a couple of recent commentaries from last month in the journal Science and Nature. These are really the two top journals that that we think of when it comes to communicating opinion. And communicating opinion is the way in which you get others outside of your immediate communities to listen to what you have to say in terms of your science. And it may be any type of science. I've largely worked within the field of global change, global environmental change. But it could be practically any discipline of science, because everything that most of us do have a bearing on the larger society. And commentaries and opinion pieces are a way in which you want to influence or at least inform in practical ways the wider world outside, including policy processes. So these Science as well as Nature are really the top journals that you're most likely to find on the desks of scientific advisors to politicians or other policymakers, and informing the wider world via these journals is thus an important strategy for communicating what you do. So as I said, my name is Ninad, and I'll be joined by Owen here, and we'll speak a bit about pitching, writing, and publishing scientific commentaries. But there will also be a call for all of you to think about publishing commentaries and opinion pieces, and not just academic papers. So sort of broadening the strategy of communication. Before I move on to commentaries themselves, I would just like to emphasize here that communication can be thought of in terms of a portfolio approach. So there are many different tools available now in the modern world to communicate what you want to, which includes traditional outlets like academic papers, but then also blogs, social media, policy briefs, meetings in person, and so on. And Future Earth is running a series of webinars in which some of these other topics have already been covered or will be covered. And so it's good to bear in mind that what we're speaking about today, the commentaries, are part of this portfolio, or a slew of tools available to help you communicate your messages. And each works slightly differently. So when you talk about journals like Nature and Science, it's good to know them well in order to be able to publish in these journals. Such journals have sort of two sections to them, two important or main sections. One is called the front half, and this is the section that concerns us today, because this is where editorials, commentaries, news, letters from readers, and other content of this nature is published. The back half is something that most of you are probably more familiar with, and I've marked those in these red circles or ellipses here. And that's where the research gets published. In Science, they're called research articles or reports, and in Nature, they're called uh, uh, news and views or articles or letters and so on. So the front half is where front half is also the most read part of these journals, and it's aimed at a much broader readership than, let's say, the back half. The research articles themselves are aimed at, and the front half of a journal is what let's say policymakers will flip through and actually take notice of. Very few people beyond specialists would go to read the research articles themselves. Owen, do you want to add anything at this point?
Yeah, hi. I'm just trying to get my picture on again.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, as you say, they're the most read and influential parts of, in terms of sort of instant impact. We've published some commentaries in Science and Nature before, where chief scientific advisors would phone up the same day or within a day or two about it and wanting more information for policymakers, etc. So it's interesting how quickly they can get that kind of policy interest, and I think one of the key things is actually reading regularly the front end. So if people really need to understand the kind of content that has happened in the last 3 to 6 months to 12 months in there, to really understand the kind of stuff that the journals are commissioning, the kind of perspectives they're taking on, and to fit in with that mold, look out for the gaps in this kind of stuff they haven't been covering, or if they clearly like a specific topic, to speak to editors about whether they entertain another article with a fresh perspective on that particular topic.
Thanks, Owen. Thanks. So I'll move on to the next slide now. This is just a list, and there may be more too, of the sorts of outlets or journals that you would think of publishing scientific commentaries in. Both Owen and I have mentioned Nature and Science, which are really the most global of the outlets, because these are read all over the world, at least the English-speaking world, I must say here. But then there are many subject journals, let's say, of the Nature group, and I have listed here Nature Geoscience, Nature Climate Change, and a newer journal, Nature Plants. And for the sort of community that Owen and I have worked in, which deals with environmental change and climate and related issues, some of these subject journals are also excellent avenues. Nature Climate Change in particular has, I think, done a very good job with representing a lot of social science research as well as opinion, and I have been very impressed with the way they've gone about this in the past year or so. So for the social scientists among you, I do encourage you to look at that also as an outlet to communicate opinion with a view to informing and influencing current policy processes or other actions. I just found out that Nature is also launching a new journal, Nature Energy, which I believe is already accepting manuscripts, and soon will also start commissioning opinion pieces. And of course, those from other arenas, I can think of the Lancet, the medical journal, as being a very influential one in its own field. And the Lancet, in fact, has been doing quite a lot on the Sustainable Development Goals, climate and health, and topics like that. So it may not be a conventional outlet that people from this sort of community think about, but it's certainly something to have in mind. There isn't anything as a perfect commentary, but we can still use some guidelines to help us shape a commentary or an opinion piece that's aimed at a scientific journal. And so the perfect commentary expresses clear views or opinions, or it offers recommendations. So simply a recitation of facts or even new science is not sufficient to turn itself into a commentary. It needs views, personal views. It needs opinions. It is often timed to inform an important activity or process. For example, a lot has been happening with the Sustainable Development Goals, or there is the big COP meeting coming up in Paris in a couple of months. So these are the sorts of activities that we as academics or communicators want to inform and influence, and we want to shape opinion with those in mind. And so our opinion pieces are usually timed to such events. And then the perfect commentary also aims to stimulate thought and action and shape the policy agenda. And so this is just a repetition in some ways. Ideal commentaries are timely and relevant. They need to be topical. They need to address issues of importance now. They need to be novel. You need to say something that others haven't said, at least in the recent past, or say something that offers a unique perspective on a particular topic. They tend to be brief. If you look at op-eds in newspapers, for example, they are often in the range of 500 words, and newspapers like the New York Times don't prefer them to be much longer. In scientific journals like Nature or Science, they can be a bit longer in the 1500 word range, and it also depends on the topic. These are focused on single issues. So this focus on single issue is very important when you communicate opinion, because if you start speaking about many different things, it tends to dilute the message. And again, as scientists or academics, we want to add in a lot of nuances, and we want to make sure all sorts of allied issues are dealt with. And that's appropriate for certain forms of communication. But when it comes to commentaries, this focus is what gives it an edge. Examples are very important for the sorts of journals I've spoken about here, because they make your opinion or views or recommendations concrete. Many journals prefer single-authored commentaries or commentaries with a limited number of authors, and this makes intuitive sense, because it's very difficult for, let's say, 30 people to agree on each other and have a strong common opinion and consensus. So these are really sort of personal perspectives, and so ideally have fewer authors rather than a large group of authors or a team. Nevertheless, certain journals, Science, for example, does allow the occasional commentary with a big group. And of course, these are constructive even when they are critical, because that's the way to get a wider group of people interested in continuing to read what you have to say. When you think of commentaries, here are some words that come into the picture. For example, solution, who, when, and to whom, action, impact, and so on. I've just thrown these up on the screen here now, but my next slide will show that they actually come from the commentary guidelines that Nature has for its own when it commissions pieces. And so this is a long text here, but I thought it was still worth putting it up there. Comment pieces are generally agenda setting, authoritative, provocative. They provide a roadmap for the solution. So they don't simply talk about a problem. That's important for Nature, and it's important for most journals of its type that commission commentaries. Nature also has this other type of commentary, which is rarer and more difficult in some ways to get through, which talks about philosophical arguments of relevance or so on, and that's a type of commentary that doesn't have to deal with particular policy processes or events or very current activities, but the commentaries that most likely we will all deal with are this first type of commentary. And then again, the specifics: who must do what, exactly, to whom, when. These are the sorts of things that they're looking at, and when they edit your commentaries, this is how they try to shape the ultimate outcome. Before going there, I'll just ask Owen if he has anything else to add.
Yeah, thanks, Ninad. Yeah, I mean, I've got Nature in front of me, so from a couple of weeks ago. So, for example, when you're talking about the number of authors, the world view section in Nature, which is like the first section you come to in Nature, it's always single issue. It's one page. It's about 800, 900 words or so, and it's always very, very topical. And maybe I could just say a little bit about the sort of timeline for some of these things that, as you mentioned, there's a sort of range of different types of commentaries out there. But if you're looking at science, the Science Policy Forum, there can be 6 months between submission and publication. So if you're timing it to click in tightly with a policy process, or then you have to have that sort of timeline built in. With Nature Worldview, it's a lot faster turnaround. It's possible to pitch or discuss ideas with an editor at Nature maybe 2 or 3 weeks before the event, and have something out on the week of the event, or very close afterwards. They want it, really, really fresh perspective, responding to news on the ground and changing circumstances. So we've got that sort of perspective, from 6 months down to a week or two for these kinds of things. There's also, and as you mentioned, the sort of solutions focus that really, you have to outline a problem, but you can't just focus on that problem. You need to start working through, strong policy recommendations to do that, to interest them, and exactly saying, who needs to do what to whom and when.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Owen, and thanks for bringing up the aspect of timeline too, because you're right, and it also depends on whether a journal is weekly or monthly. So many of the subject journals of the Nature group, for example, are monthly journals, and thus slightly slower. So it might take a few months from the time they commission a commentary to the time that it actually comes out. Whereas with Nature and Science, they have opinion pieces every week, and tend to operate on faster time scales. Although, as you noted, with Science, it can still take longer, and that might perhaps be because they have historically commissioned fewer of these pieces per issue. But we were just speaking before this discussion that might be changing, and that Science has been working on its front half, and we might see them publishing a few more in the future. So I'll share my screen again here. Okay. And then we move on to pitching a commentary, which is in some ways the most important bit of thinking about commentaries. And there is no easy way here, I should say, upfront. And that's because most comments or commentary pieces are commissioned by journals. They don't really appreciate necessarily receiving hundreds of emails every week asking them to publish a commentary or to be allowed a chance to publish one. And this is in some ways the least democratic element of top journals. They have a considerable say in what sort of an opinion piece they feel is needed at this point in time and that they want to commission. So as Owen said at the beginning, it's important to get to know journals well, to know what they like to publish, what they have been publishing recently on or in your topic in the recent past. Why was that published? Was it timed with a particular event, or is there something happening in the field that they seem to now be suddenly interested in and are publishing on? So knowing the journal that you would like to publish in is important. And it's also important to get to know the editors, not necessarily in person, but by various other means. When I used to work at Nature Geoscience, we obviously had to have content every month to publish, and that included opinion pieces and commentaries. So an avenue for us to commission those was conferences or workshops, and we particularly liked smaller, more informal settings where we could interact with researchers, with potential authors, and could commission then or encourage people to submit both research articles as well as commentary type articles. We often got ideas for editorials also in these conferences or workshops, and so it's always a good idea to invite editors when you are thinking of organizing, particularly these smaller conferences. They will turn up for bigger ones anyway, because that's a way to keep current with what's going on. But if you invite them to smaller ones, not only will they be able to offer some good perspectives, but also perhaps find content that's worth commissioning and eventually publishing. Many of the journals also have booths in big meetings, for example, the American Geophysical Union meeting or European meetings of that nature. And editors tend to spend some time at the booths interacting with potential authors. So that's another way to engage and interact with them. As I said, some journals do allow you to approach them with unsolicited contributions. I know that you can write to Science and say, I have an idea for a policy forum, and pitch it in that form. It's more difficult with Nature to do that. Some of Nature's subject journals, you could write to the editors or to the journal itself, make a pre-submission inquiry, as they call it. So this is also a matter of trial and error, and there's not an easy solution here. But here are a couple of approaches to help you start thinking about it, and then establish some working relationships with the journal and its editors.
And Ninad,
yes.
I guess I should also say that it's definitely useful to speak to editors before writing a commentary, because often, even if they are interested in the subject matter, they can have quite strong opinions on the framing for it, which are often really, really good, and stuff in perspectives you wouldn't necessarily have yourself. But more importantly, you can spend a huge amount of effort getting an author team together and writing it with the aim of publishing in a high-profile journal, but then finding out that actually they've already got a series of articles on this topic already scheduled in for the next few months, so they're not going to consider yours no matter how exciting it is, or they have a specific angle on things they'd like to bring into it that might completely change the slant of what you do. And then more importantly, once you actually get into that engagement with editors and they are on board with your idea, then it's more as working together on developing the content, as opposed to sort of us against them type, pitching something and then getting rejected and having to try to convince them again, or whatever. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, I guess, thinking like a journalist. I mean, because it's interesting, it's been great, really enjoyable working with you on these things for the last 5 years, because I'm coming from it from a journalistic angle. That's my background, and you're coming from an academic angle, but we both worked in publishing from those perspectives, and that I think you almost need to think like a journalist in pitching the story, or at least half journalist science when pitching commentaries to more high-profile media, because that's how they're going to see things. They're going to be looking for the news hooks.
Thanks, Owen. Yeah, I think that's a really important point, because one can spend a lot of effort to write something up before soliciting feedback from the journal or editors, and then it might turn out to be effort that wasn't really worth it to begin with. And as Owen said, there's often very good ideas and perspectives that come up during this initial interaction, which might help you shape a commentary. I'm speaking here about pitching a commentary. Of course, conceiving of a commentary is really the first step, and that's something that each has to do for his or her own self, based on their work and the sort of process that they are wanting to inform or influence. But again, Owen's advice about thinking like a journalist is helpful there, because then you start thinking in terms of stories and narratives. And many commentaries are in some ways narratives, or they are they work like stories, and so having that perspective really helps. So then I don't have much more to say, but I thought I would nevertheless go through sort of the structure of a commentary. And again, this is, as we discussed, all of this can change once you submit it or once you begin interaction with a journal, because they will edit all of this. And what you write originally may not be what gets published. But for you to have even some sort of a raw material for a commentary and to shape your own thinking, it may help a bit to talk about the various elements of a commentary and how they work. So the title obviously should be brief and informative. Longer titles are often seen in academic papers and are perhaps necessary there to give a decent idea of the nuance. However, opinion pieces need to have shorter titles. 5 to 10 words is just a ballpark estimate. Active verbs really help. So something framed in the passive, it doesn't quite have the same impact. Question marks, I'm personally not a big fan of, because they indicate some sort of a doubt, and ideally you want to express a view or an opinion, and it's all right for that to be wrong, and others will tell you with their commentaries or their opinions or their letters that you were wrong. But when you express yours in the form of a commentary, I'd rather not have doubt being expressed there. There's other avenues for that. So just a couple of examples of commentaries Owen and I worked with in terms of the titles. Then there's something called a stand first, which comes immediately below the title in a printed commentary. And this is a brief summary of the key message, the main recommendations that you might have. And this sort of gives a snapshot of the entire commentary. It's what draws in the reader and makes them go further into the bulk of your text and message. And these are, again, quite brief, usually 1 or 2 sentences long. Not more than 300 characters was what we used at Nature Geoscience when I was editor there. And these are a little bit like an abstract for a research paper. And when I write opinion pieces or commentaries, I find it very helpful to write this stand first because then it helps to give direction to my thinking. And I know in advance what I want to say, and then in the rest of the commentary or blog or whatever, I just expand on that. So again, an example of a recent piece that Owen was part of, which says, clearly and succinctly the argument or the message. And the main body frames the issue. The framing is very important, again, to draw in the reader, and to make sure they start off on a foundation that then helps them understand your argument that follows later. And this is where you also present the problem and introduce it. Then you may move on to diagnosing the causes of the problem, offering some examples, some recent cases. And then you move on to proposing the remedies. And again, it's worth remembering here the message of who should do what and so on. That's quite important for journals. And also lends a concreteness to a commentary. Examples and case studies are really key, and journals will insist that you supply those, because otherwise there's a danger of a commentary sounding very abstract. And then I just thought I would go through a few commentaries that we've worked with, Owen and myself, and just to give you an idea of how these look, because not all of us read through the front half of journals. And Owen, just add whatever and at whichever stage you would like to. This was a commentary that Owen and I, or a worldview piece in nature, that we worked with Chulun Toktok, who's a Mongolian member of IGBP, and he had an interesting idea about a sustainable development, a sustainable human development index. His point was the HDI doesn't account for pollution at all, or the damage that some countries might do to the global commons. Even though they might have a high HDI, they might be big polluters too. So somehow we need to correct that. And so he calculated this human sustainable development index, and we thought it was a nice idea, and then we helped him pitch and frame that.
Yeah, and
yes.
I'd say then we spoke to David Adam, is the editor at Nature for the World View commentaries, and he was very interested in this. It was a good idea. We pitched at the right time. We pitched maybe four or 5 weeks before the launch of the Human Development Index, which comes out usually every October, November time. So the timing was good. We had a few weeks to write it up and to get it scheduled in. So that was good. And then significantly, David was really interested in having a perspective from someone from Mongolia, because he said that Nature just rarely gets perspectives and strong opinions from some of these countries. It's very can be very North American and European dominated, yet Nature is very keen to have a much broader perspective and readership, and bring in more thinkers from elsewhere. So that's a really positive thing, I think, to bear in mind.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with that, and sometimes there is an impression that it's very difficult to get in, but I think if you achieve the right timing and have sort of an idea that's new, and then again, if you happen to represent a view that's not represented very frequently in these journals, then they're very open to that. Just a couple more examples here. So again, in terms of timing, with respect to large processes that are happening, many of these examples will relate to the Sustainable Development Goals, because there was a big process that lasted for a couple of years with a few different steps, and then we here at IGBP tried to shape that process or inform that process at each stage. And so Owen and colleagues published this commentary also at a key stage in this process.
And this I would say on this, so both science and nature and new scientists and are interested in the Sustainable Development Goals and these international processes because they're clearly important and influential. Yet they do struggle to find really fresh angles on these issues, and they find that these international processes are very, very abstract. It's very hard to relate to the common person or what's happening, on the ground at a national level, and it's very sort of policy wonk type stuff. All the people in this field, both the sort of scientists of the science policy interface and the policymakers, have a language they speak, and that's very, very abstract, very difficult to engage with, to really get excited about. So while they feel they should cover this, they really need to find really, really nice, sharp angles and ways in to do it. And I had several discussions with some editors at Science back in November last year about covering the Sustainable Development Goals, and they were saying, well, just sustainable development as a concept itself is very difficult. Is there any other way we can get in here, like urbanization, for example? Can we have an urbanization future scenarios focus, and that will get us into the goals in a more sort of concrete way. Which is just getting back to this sort of journalistic thinking that you've got the articles have to resonate with the reader. If you want to interest the reader, then it has to in some way be relevant to their lives, even within the scientific community.
Agreed. Here's another example from nature that Owen and I worked on, or provided advice on, and this had to do with China's urbanization. China was to launch a big strategy for urbanization, and then a colleague, Xu Meibai, who's part of Future Earth now, also approached us with some ideas, some good ideas about that related to the implementation of this urbanization strategy. And her point was that it'll be successful or it'll fail depending on sort of the local response to this strategy. So a large national strategy is well and good, but the real challenge is to implement it at lower levels, and so this is another. We sort of helped frame it as well as pitch it. Owen, if you want to add to that.
Yeah. So and again, Zume was really pleased with the outcome here. I think she'd been working on several commentaries that hadn't managed to get published in the last few years, and she was getting a bit frustrated with this process, and trying to understand exactly what the editors were needing. And I think when Ninette and I started working on this, I think that the focus of the article and the focus of the pitch wasn't so clearly aligned to this new China's urbanization strategy. It wasn't as clear. It wasn't very, very clear that China was just about to launch this 10-year urbanization strategy, and this was going to be the biggest mobilization of people in history. And it's absolutely huge. So that's a big news peg, those two facts, that need to be really, really high up so that editors get it instantly. People who aren't involved in these kinds of processes, and this strategy wasn't a big thing in the media until it was launched. The editors don't necessarily know all the details about it. So you really have to have that news peg very, very, very clear up top so that they see instantly the potential repercussions of an article like this. And indeed, Zume Bai said that when it was published, within a few days, she was getting contacted by policymakers and scientists in China about the article. So she felt she had quite an instant impact with it.
Thanks, Owen. And this is also an example, because we do get the question sometimes that does our topic have to be global in scope and to deal with large international policy processes? And that's not necessarily the case, as long as any local or regional issue that you're dealing with is relevant to and of interest to the rest of the world. So China's urbanization is obviously a huge issue in terms of its potential bearing on not only the region but the rest of the world, and so other issues of this nature, conceivably from elsewhere around the world, could be of interest, and it's just a matter of aligning them, as Owen said, with current happenings and themes of interest. And again, on the theme of sustainable development goals, there was another worldview also timed to inform a process. And then here's another from our former director, Sybil Sitsinger, and that was for a call. It essentially said that the physical system or the biogeochemical system can't be treated as separate from the socioeconomic system. And so these are all views or opinions or specific recommendations and just examples of what sort of material can be shaped into a commentary. Here's an example from Science from some years ago, and this was in advance of the big Rio +20 meeting in 2012. And this comes from the Earth System Governance Project. And again, the project had approached us. They were trying to get a message regarding governance as relevant to this Rio meet across, but were having trouble both framing it as well as pitching it and sort of convincing journals of the importance of the timing of this sort of a message. And again, we help them frame and pitch it. Owen, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I think this was great. This had it has a sort of list format. Here's 7 or 9 recommendations for Rio +20 relating specifically relating to governance, which was really strong. People love lists. If you look online, a lot of things in Twitter and Facebook and etc. 9 key things to do this, or 9 ways that will change your life, or whatever it might be. And the same with the journals. This is a really nice format for people to read. People can dip in and out of the list. They can sort of quickly scan a list in a way you can't do with sort of more blocked text. So it is a good format. And then the other point with this was, I remember when we got the pitch in, so the pitch largely focused on the academic credentials of the authors, and we reframed that, I think, to really focus on the sort of intellectual content, what was new, the importance of the process that was just about to happen, their input into that process, and why that was a specifically fresh perspective. Because that's thinking more from that sort of news angle. They're less worried about, they're assuming everybody's a credible scientist, but so it's the freshest perspective that you really need to get high up in the pitch, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks, Owen. And then Owen himself had also something again related to the sustainable development goals, and that's my last slide, I think. But I'm aware that there are also some with a social science background here. So I just thought I would maybe speak a couple of minutes about sort of that branch and that community, it's entirely possible to have content in the form of a commentary in Nature or Science or allied journals that deals with social science topics. And as I said, Nature Climate Change, for example, I have been even surprised myself because it's easier to expect something on cognitive psychology or something that's a bit more utilitarian to be published there. But I've seen commentaries recently from people like Eric Olin Wright, Noel Castry, who are, you could call them critical social scientists, and I would not have personally expected to see material from them as commentaries in Nature Climate Change or any nature journal. So that gives a lot of scope and hope for other communities like that to put together something that helps shape the discussion, and especially in the context of transdisciplinary processes, future Earth or sustainable development goals or so on. There is a need for social science voices to be heard, and I think that community should certainly take advantage of the opportunity afforded by commentaries, because those are ways in which to get some of your natural scientist colleagues also to pay attention to what you're saying. Owen?
I mean, Nature Climate Change, I think, is a fantastic journal. I mean, it's the way it's been set up, and I think it's been quite experimental. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, yeah, I could see you speaking, and right, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong section. Yeah, I think Nature Climate Change is fantastic. I think it's been very, very experimental in this space, interdisciplinary, really bringing in the social sciences and the humanities as well to some extent in their thinking, in their perspectives and commentaries, and they can see that as a success as well. I think its impact factor is going up very, very rapidly, and it's having impacts there. We're hoping that Nature are considering, I think, launching a sustainability journal, as well as you mentioned the energy journal. So these are sort of really good opportunities, because these are premium quality journals that really can have impact. And if they're spreading out into covering more of our global sustainability work, particularly along the lines of Future Earth, I think then we've got more avenues to discuss and have dialogue on these issues. A couple of other things I was thinking about: infographics and data visualization. Science, Nature, New England Journal of Medicine, The Lancet, etc. now take far more data visualizations than ever before, both in the back end as research products and outputs, in terms of animations, etc., and the front end, there's sort of additional content and sort of infographics, and static things on the page, and they are open to ideas for a graphic, infographic based commentary, which they're very well read. They're just because they're so attractive, and if you get them right, there's a really nice narrative that takes you through the infographic, takes you through the story, and they're kind of novel. They've got that sort of novelty value that people like. So there's a lot more investment in that now, both a standalone double-page infographic on an issue, and as within a long commentary. And they've got some good graphics people to work with you on that. And the other thing that you might comment on as well is are the special issues. So a few times a year, they will put out a special issue on a specific subject, which can be really quite in-depth, quite surprising how much is covered in there. It could run to 30 pages or so, with 10, 15 articles on there. And so there is a process for special issues. I mean, obviously, all the journals are looking for ideas for special issues all the time, and they have quite a long timeline out for them. I think the science, at least, it's at least a year and maybe 18 months booked out to think about these things. But I think it's worth having a dialogue with editors and bouncing around ideas for, urbanization. When was the last time somebody did something on urbanization or transformations or something as an academic discipline? I was talking to some people at working on the Transformations Conference a couple of weeks ago about that as a possibility. So I think people should think hard about that, and then discuss that with editors. What do you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and there are special issues, maybe not the same as conventional journals, but these are issues when editors feel there is a topic that needs more in-depth attention, and they'll then try to club some front half pieces with back half ones. So let's say they have a paper coming in that deals with an interesting topic, and they feel that could be expanded in terms of not only the new science that it talks about, but also opinions that then deal with the implications. And so you might find an editorial, a couple of commentaries, and then actual research articles on that theme. And recently Nature did a sort of a special issue on interdisciplinarity, which again had a news article, it had an editorial, I think, and a few commentaries about that. So that's something you see more and more, and science has started doing these also, and that's certainly an option to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I guess we should encourage any questions or thoughts from the audience on.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm not sure. I actually find my system means I can't see the chat box.
I can see the chat box, and I guess that is the only way for the audience to pose queries, if any. And I hope they've been able to hear us fine.
Hi.
Hello,
I hope you
Lizzie.
can hear me. I can see the chat box, so I thought I'd jump in. There's a question from Gerald Jurazinski, sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly, about joining a DFG roundtable discussion later this year on interacting and networking in the geosciences. So Gerald, maybe if you want to get in touch by email about that, and we can follow up.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
Whilst people are thinking about questions, I was wondering, what would you recommend the best way to go ahead was? Say if you're a researcher working in an institute and you thought you hadn't been in touch with any of the scientific journals you mentioned in the past, but you thought you'd quite like to suggest writing a commentary. Would you try and talk to communications teams first of all? Would you speak to colleagues, get directly in touch with the journals? How would you go about it?
Thanks, Lizzie. I'll begin, and then I'll let Owen add to it. Yeah, I mean, I would say, firstly, not everything is possible to communicate as an opinion. So some of it is just new science, and then you do it and move on. But there's much of what you do that you would say, okay, here are facts, and these are facts that are important to inform a particular process or a policy process. And then when you feel strongly enough about it, many people don't have avenues to do much about it. But now we have blogs, we have social media, and of course we have commentaries as a route. So you can discuss that with colleagues, and of course if you have the luxury of having a communications team, support team at your institution. Owen and I did that job for IGBP, but some universities do have people to help with that. Then certainly they look at things in a different way, and they can help give shape to your ideas or views. They can help frame it, and so on. But in parallel, you also need to start looking at what some of these top journals are doing. So if your idea relates to sustainable development goals, then it's critical that you look at what some of the top journals have written about it already in the past few months. Is there an angle that hasn't been covered, and does that happen to be the angle that comes out of your work? So that's how I would begin the process.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You absolutely must read the journals every week and read the front ends of those journals to really understand the content, how they're framing things, how these are written, and then analyze, well, does your material fit in with the way they frame things, the way they write things? I mean, because there's very little flexibility in any journalism on these things. If you've got some sort of novel way of telling a narrative or story, chances are it just won't work. I mean, they like they're fairly formulaic, and in fact, they even for writing a commentary, there's pretty much a formula for doing it. For op-eds for newspapers, which the worldview more or less follows. They're fairly formulaic, and same for the commentaries. It's kind of different formula, but if your stuff doesn't fit within that formula, then you can increase your chances if you can make it fit within that formula. And then so identify, and they all have very different sections. There's the worldview section, there's the commentary section, perspectives pieces, reviews, etc. So you have to know where it would most likely fit, and then potentially contact an editor there and get into a discussion about it and bounce some ideas around. And I think the first few ones you attempt may not get very far, and because you're just sort of learning the interaction, and but then once you get one, then you can get more, because then you sort of understand how it works, and you can build up a relationship with some of the editors, I suppose.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thanks. We have another question from Karen O'Brien, which a few of the other attendees are interested in. Could you say something about the use of references in commentaries? How many are generally appropriate? Will the journals give you guidelines on this? How should you reference?
Yeah, okay, well, 10 references, I think, for a Nature commentary section, and no more, so you have to be really tight with that. In fact, with the whole word count, it's very, very strict. They really, really try to minimize it. There'll only be an acknowledgement section if it's absolutely 100% essential to acknowledge somebody or some organization. Otherwise, and you have to put a really, really strong argument to them for that. So, I mean, it's all to do with space, really. The space is at a premium. And then when you think about the worldview again, no references in there. It's just not what they do. So yeah, so in which case it's kind of more journalistic.
Yeah, I would say 5 to 10 references, because again the purpose of a commentary is different from that of an academic paper. I should also quickly add that in some instances commentaries are also reviewed. They are subjected to peer review, although not in the same sense as academic papers are. But at least in my personal experience at Nature Geoscience was if there was a topic that one felt would benefit from the opinion of peers, then we did send it out for review to just get an idea that things are okay. Especially if there were some technical bits in there. So let's say if I commissioned something on carbon sequestration and I felt not very comfortable in judging it myself in terms of its technical aspects, then I would send it out for review to 1 or 2 people.
Yeah, I think with the Science Policy Forum, again, that's the very long time horizon on that, sort of 6 months, is related to the peer review. I think they send it to three people for review.
Yeah.
Thanks. A follow-up question on that. Is it okay to have non-academic or non-peer-reviewed references to present the case in a commentary?
I would think so. Yeah, I mean the world is changing very rapidly, and the sort of information that we deal with and we refer to now is so distributed and networked and comes from all sorts of sources that I would be surprised if there would be any bar on that. Obviously, it's important for them to know that it's a legitimate and credible source of information.
Yeah, and there's also that sort of personal touch with it. You're often, unlike an academic paper, you can end up, quoting people in the media or stuff that appears in the media in a way that's, you'd often reference that kind of stuff in a way that's slightly different to, academic references.
Okay, and another question about the use of data. Can commentaries also be based on a center piece of data, such as an easily digestible meta-analysis that would form the basis for the commentary?
In principle, yes. It's hard to rule something out, but the key is, does your data lead you to offer a specific view or a perspective or a recommendation, let's say, that would be relevant to ongoing discussions. Again, coming back to examples from climate and sustainable development, let's say COP21 is happening and you've done some sort of meta-analysis, you have data. Is there something in there that would help shape or influence that sort of a process? So these are the sorts of questions you need to ask, because commentaries aren't really about new science or data per se. They are in terms of shaping processes, opinions, views. And so that's what determines whether what you have is really worthy of a commentary.
Yeah, I think the Global Carbon Project that releases the Global Carbon Budget each year, and usually around the time of the COP meetings, UNFCCC, so it's highly policy relevant. And so last year they had, I think, 3 or 4 commentaries in Nature Geoscience, Nature Climate Change,
Yeah.
all the backbone for all of them was the latest budget, the data behind that, and they'd have different analyses of that, and obviously each one was had a different angle that was all relevant to the policy process.
Thanks for that. There doesn't seem to be any more questions at the minute. If you'd still like to ask a question, please type away now. There's lots of thank yous coming in. So thanks to everyone who stayed right to the end of this webinar. I can see that most of you have stayed online. The slides will be made available, as will the video, so please share it widely with your colleagues and encourage as many people to have a look as possible. We're encouraging people to stay in touch via Twitter using the pop-up webinar hashtag. So if you have any further questions that you want to put to Ninad or to Owen or to put to the wider community, including other attendees, please go ahead and use that and get in touch via Twitter.
Okay.
Anything else you want to add, Ninad and Owen?
Okay, thank you very much. And I should also say, if you have feedback, we welcome that, and you can either let Lizzie know or pass it on via Twitter. But thanks for your patience and for attending.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's great to be part of this. Good, and we'll be running quite a few more webinars in the new year as well. Some repeats of the ones we've done already, and some new subjects. So. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.